Hey, I'm Jan. Thanks for joining me today. Today is my first psychiatry and mental health focused video, and given that it is the end of Pride Month, I kind of wanted to focus it on LGBTQ plus psychiatry and mental health treatment. And so, though I'm in the beginning of my training and I'm not an expert on this topic, I did take some time to pull some resources, which I'll put in the info box below, that are essentially provided by the American Psychiatric Association and then also the equivalent Psychology Association to offer training for anyone who wants to learn more about this topic. So I will say that there's definitely a lot to learn as far as how to help this group. And so I will say that there are a lot of ideas about what it means to be LGBTQ plus, and lots of questions like, can I use the word queer? Has that word been reappropriated? Has it not been? So I think that it's important to just get an idea of what you're getting yourself into if you're going to be helping someone in the community. And that said, the community is definitely not a monolith by any means, and there are a lot of issues that intersect with the LGBTQ community issues. So it's important to have a grasp on multiple things. And so that makes it pretty tough. But I think that patients can tell if you're trying to make an effort and you're trying to educate yourself. And it's generally better to know something about the community before you start treating someone in the community than trying to figure it out as you go. So there are a lot of helpful resources that, like I said, I put in the box below. But I definitely want to take some time just to focus on what Pride is, why it exists, and how you can help someone embrace that part of themselves. So the important thing to know about Pride is that it's a celebration of self-affirmation. The first Pride originally came about 1 year after the Stonewall riots in New York City, which were in response to the New York Police Department raiding the Stonewall Inn, which was a gay venue. And so much of this social activism and change was led by transgender women of color. And I would say that the most notable one, at least the one that I have heard the most, is transgender activist Marsha P. Johnson. She's a black woman that really helped pave the way. And so the importance of the self-affirmation piece is kind of helps answer the question why there isn't a straight pride movement as well. And that's because the straight community or the heterosexual community is not necessarily oppressed for that identity, and in almost all cases, heterosexuality is treated and viewed as the norm. And so considering that the LGBTQ plus community is still at significant risk, and we've seen that in the past few years, violence towards the community has been increasing, this is a way for people to be visible and to say, I deserve to exist, I have rights, and I deserve to be celebrated. And so especially as rights are new for the community, and rights, the feeling that rights can be given and taken away is definitely something that can cause anxiety in this population. And it's important to know that many of the victories that we're treating as normal today were hard fought and were not guaranteed by any means. So I think we can't, with everything that's been going on right now, it's impossible to drive on without saying that the transgender community of color, particularly black transgender women, are at extremely high risk of violence. And so that's a very vulnerable population. As far as being LGBTQ plus in the healthcare system, this group of people has experienced a lot of healthcare barriers, and it's kind of back and forth on what can be discriminated against and what can't be discriminated against. And so LGBTQ plus people report a lot of barriers of either not knowing where they can get treatment or what kind of treatment they can receive, or their providers are not knowledgeable on specific topics that might apply to them. So if you're not in mental health and you are a provider of any kind, it's really important to understand what health populations are specific, what health problems rather are specific to this population, and then making sure that you know everything you can so that you can ask the right questions, and then you can increase access to healthcare. So I'll put some of the links in the description box below, but the LGBTQ community is definitely at a higher risk for mental health and for thinking about suicide or attempting suicide. And in psychiatry, we always talk about the biopsychosocial model, and of course there are a lot of psychological and social aspects that can drive that behavior. And so it's really important to know what organizations exist, particularly for the LGBTQ plus community, and I've put those below as well. And essentially what I'm saying, I'm kind of leading up to this conversation of well, if I'm not in this community, how can I be a good ally as a coworker, or how can I be a good ally as a provider? And so the important thing to know is that if the queer community is poorly represented in your space or in your patient population, it can be tempting to reach out to that person to ask them, hey, like, I'm just learning about this. What can I do? How can I better understand? And while that does come from a good place, the impact of that can be somewhat draining, because if you are the underrepresented person and someone is coming to you for essentially a custom curriculum on how they can learn about the issues that affect you, that can be really time consuming, and especially emotionally exhausting when you have to kind of identify where that person's at and then create a roadmap for them. So if you want to be a good ally, I would recommend definitely saying like, hey, like, I want to put the work in, but can you point me in the right direction? And I think that communicates to the person you're talking to that you respect them and you want to know more about them, but you're not demanding of them all of the work. So I would also say that, sorry, my cat is being funny. So I would also say that to be a good ally, you definitely need to listen, and you need to learn from your patients and also from your coworkers about what homophobia and other phobias have done to their sense of self and their ability to work and function. And so additionally, you need to do your part to foster a climate where people feel safe. So one way to do that is to signal to your patient without saying it directly that they're not going to be punished for their identity. And so I know I've seen a lot of providers have like the rainbow flag in their office, or the Human Rights Council flag on their door. And so that way you don't have to come out and say like, hey, just so you know, I'm an ally. The patient can just kind of, while they're waiting, gather that data and know, you know what, maybe I can talk about this in this office. And so then finally, I would say that that much like any other group, the LGBTQ plus community has its own culture. And then many folks don't identify with that culture, even though they're in that group. And so that can make it pretty challenging, because you don't necessarily know where someone is at as far as how much they embrace the culture itself, and that takes a lot of work. And so again, as far as being a good ally goes and being a good provider goes, my recommendation would be to do your best to do as much education that you can for yourself and then also for your patient. And I think that will go a long way. Another thing that you can do is take a look at how much queer culture you have in your own life. Obviously, there are like brilliant queer writers, film directors, actors, and there's a lot that can be done to, just enjoy yourself that happens to be centered around the queer community. So I think what I'll do is I'll put a few of some book recommendations below, and I think that will be helpful just to kind of get a perspective of something that was written by a queer person or that features a queer character. Additionally, I guess this is kind of like, if I haven't convinced you by this point, there is a portion for those who are training as psychiatrists, where the American Board of Psychiatrists and Neurologists and the ACGME require certain competencies when working with LGBTQ plus people, and I'll put those specific requirements in the description below. I hope you didn't come here expecting to learn everything that you need to know about queer patients, but I hope that I've given you some tools that will help you educate yourself and also enjoy yourself, and I think that will go a long way. And if you have any questions, please comment below, and I'll definitely do my best to answer them. And yeah, thanks.